Lesson 3. How to recognize emotions and body signals before they turn into thoughts. In the previous chapters you saw that the brain behaves like an overloaded computer, the mind like a program that creates stories, and the ego like a hero who takes everything personally. Now it is time to go even deeper, to the very beginning of the whole process. Before a thought appears, before any of I or the world gets activated, something always happens in the body. This is the first signal. In modern therapies for schizophrenia, CBT for psychosis, metacognitive training, self-help programs, a great deal of attention is paid to the so-called early warning signs of relapse, subtle changes in well-being, emotions, and functioning that appear a few days, sometimes weeks, before symptoms get worse. They look different for different people. One person starts sleeping worse, another becomes irritable, someone else feels growing tension, a estranged activation, problems with concentration, withdrawal from contact, loss of energy, a tiring sense of anxiety for no reason. Often the same sentence appears, I feel kind of weird. Therapy manuals emphasize that this sentence is too general. It needs to be broken down into specifics, where in the body this weird feeling appears, what exactly the fear is, what changes in behavior are occurring. In schizophrenia, things usually happen like this. First, the body signals something, then the mind tries to interpret it, and the ego immediately grabs the interpretation and turns it into a personal story. If you do not notice this, the mechanism starts to run on its own: tension, fear, thought, story, belief. Western therapy and Buddhist practice meet at exactly one point. If you learn to respond already at the level of body and emotion, you do not have to enter the whole narrative. In practice, this means that you learn to recognize your own relapse signature. In CBTP protocols, this is worked on in great detail. The therapist asks questions about what was happening with your body, mood, sleep, and energy before the last time you went to the hospital or before your symptoms worsened. Here you do this yourself, slowly, honestly, without judging yourself. You can recall one of your more difficult periods and ask, was I sleeping worse then? Did a strange fear appear? Did I start avoiding people? Did I feel as if my body was constantly tense? Did pains, palpitations, a sense of being on the edge show up? These are your warning signals. They are not proof that something is wrong with you. They are just control lights. Buddhism would say that the body is the first gong. The wave of emotion appears as a sensation in the belly, chest, throat, head. If, at that moment, awareness is attentive, you can simply see this wave, feel it, breathe with it, and let it subside. If, however, the ego wakes up first, it immediately asks, what does this mean? Who is doing this to me? What is happening? Is this a sign? And then the wave becomes a story, and the story becomes a source of suffering. That is why the first practice proposed both by psychosis therapy programs and mindfulness practice is to pause at the level of pure sensation. As soon as you notice that the body is tensing in a familiar way, that something is shaking, tightening, burning, that your breath is becoming shallower, you do not have to explain it. Stop for a moment. Take 3 calm breaths, deliberately slower than usual. Feel the air coming in and going out. Instead of asking, "Why do I feel this way?" ask rather, "Where do I feel this?" This question moves you from the level of thought to the level of the body. In many therapeutic programs, people with psychosis are encouraged to keep a simple signal diary: day, time, what I feel in the body, what my mood is, how I slept the previous night, whether I avoided people, whether a sense of tension or unreality appeared. The point is not to analyze yourself endlessly, but to notice repeating patterns. Over time, you can see that certain signs almost always precede a worsening of symptoms. For example, 2 or 3 nights without sleep, a constant feeling that someone is watching, a sense of noise in the head, loss of concentration, withdrawal from conversations. This is your personal pattern. The better you know it, the earlier you can respond, not the illness. From a Buddhist perspective, all of this is a training in mindfulness of the body, kayanupassana, that is, consciously being in the body instead of in the mind stories. You do not try to chase away tension, you do not fight fear, you do not try to convince yourself that everything is fine. You simply notice, there is tension, there is fear, there is fatigue. At the moment you name it in this way, it stops being mere and becomes an experience that has appeared in the field of awareness. This is in line with what modern metacognitive therapy for psychosis emphasizes. What matters more than the content of the thought is how you relate to it, whether you believe it completely or can see it as a phenomenon. In practice, you can train a few simple steps. When you feel that something is building up, first pause. Notice the body. Is your heart beating faster? Are your muscles tense? Is your jaw clenched? Are your hands sweaty? Take a slow exhale, a bit longer than the inhale. This is a simple, well-researched method for calming the nervous system. Then look at your surroundings. What exactly do you see? Which colors, shapes, lines? Listen to sounds, not to what the voice says, but to the ordinary noise of the street, the sound of the refrigerator, the wind, birds. Touch something, the back of a chair, your own knees, the floor under your feet. When you return to the senses, you pull your attention out from under the control of the ego, which lives off interpretation, and give it back to awareness, which sees things as they are. This is exactly how modern therapy programs describe it, as grounding, returning to the here and now before the thoughts fully spin up. It is not a way to ensure that you never have symptoms again, but it is a way to keep the symptoms from taking over the entire stage. Each such return to the body and senses weakens the automatic chain. Tension in the body equals danger equals someone is doing something to me. Instead, you learn a new chain. Tension in the body equals a signal equals I can slow down a bit and breathe. Treatment guidelines for schizophrenia emphasize that an important element of recovery is self-management, the ability to recognize your own symptoms, cope with stress, and know what to do in case of crisis. This lesson is exactly about that, about learning to recognize the first subtle steps of the illness before the whole scene unfolds. Medicine can provide medication, a doctor can advise, a therapist can guide the conversation, but only you can feel the first tightening in your belly and say, "Aha, this is my signal, I know it, now I will take 3 breaths, return to the body, and not jump straight into thoughts." For the ego, this is a bit like losing control. Until now, it reacted automatically and instantly grabbed every emotion, turning it into its story. Now you are teaching it something new, that it can wait. That before the story there is always a sensation. That not every wave has to be named as a drama. The Buddhist approach is very clear. Emotions are not the problem is the attachment to the story the ego builds on them. You no longer have to feed that story. Emotions are one of the earliest parts of the whole process. Before any thoughts arise, before the first interpretations appear, before the ego starts pulling you into a narrative, first comes an emotion. It is the spark. Fear, anger, tension, arousal, frustration, sadness, rage, guilt, shame, anxiety, and sometimes a mixture of several of these. In schizophrenia, emotions can erupt faster, more strongly, and without a clear reason, because the limbic system is more activated and the brain reacts more violently to stimuli. The emotion itself is not the enemy. It comes like a wave, it rises, reaches a peak, then falls. The problem begins only when the ego wants to explain it immediately. Ordinary tension in the belly is taken as proof of danger. Ordinary worry about the future becomes a sense that someone is planning something. Ordinary activation becomes an energy that is supposed to mean something important. This is how the vicious cycle works. Emotion gives rise to thought. Thought strengthens the emotion intensifies the thought. If you do not learn to recognize emotions before the ego starts creating a narrative, your reactions will look as if they appear suddenly, even though in reality they begin subtly, with the body and with emotion. That is why, in therapy for schizophrenia, a lot of time is devoted to recognizing emotions themselves. The first step is learning to name them by their proper names. When tension appears, instead of asking, "What does this mean?" try saying, "I feel fear, I feel anger, I feel sadness, I feel anxiety, I feel agitation." It is a simple technique, but its effectiveness is enormous. At the moment you name the emotion, it becomes something that has its own shape and boundary, and not a vague something bad that the ego interprets in its own way. In practice, this change of a single word can stop half of a future episode. The second stage is accepting the emotion without trying to change it immediately. In metacognitive therapy, MCT, and ACT, the approach "allow what is to be as it is" used. Fear can simply be fear. Anger can be anger. Tension can be tension. When you try to push it away, it grows. When you allow it to be, the energy of resistance disappears and the emotion can naturally subside. Buddhism has spoken about this for thousands of years. Suffering does not come from the emotion, but from the resistance to it. The third important element is the ability to notice exactly where the emotion is located in the body. In practice, it looks like this. When you feel fear, instead of following its story, you direct your attention downward, to the belly, chest, throat, shoulders, head. Where is the tension strongest? What temperature does it have? What texture? Does it pulse, or is it steady? Does it move? This way of observing comes directly from mindfulness programs used in psychotherapy, but it is also the basis of Buddhist contemplation of the body. It is a simple truth: the body always tells the truth earlier than the thought. Once you see the emotion, you can start using regulation techniques. Professional manuals list breathing first as the basic tool for influencing the nervous system. The point is a slow, longer exhale. It is the exhale that calms the limbic system. You can inhale for 4 seconds and exhale for 6. You do not have to do this for long. 3 repetitions can change the dynamics of the entire experience. This is not meditation, it is pure biological regulation, very well researched in anxiety and psychosis therapy. Another extremely effective technique is shifting attention to specific senses. You can focus your gaze on one object in the room, a cup, a chair, a plant. You can listen to a neutral sound, the ticking of a clock, the hum of a fan, breathing. You can touch something, the fabric of your shirt, the back of a chair, the table. In clinical psychology, this is called grounding. It works because emotions need attention in order to turn into thoughts. If you shift attention to something real, the thought does not get fuel. What is crucial is that in moments of strong emotion, the mind will want to tell you a story right away. The ego will try to explain where the fear comes from, why you feel tension, what it might mean. But the emotion is not a sign. It is just a signal from the body, nothing more. If you learn to pause in these moments and let emotions be emotions, they will not turn into a story. And if they do not become a story, they will not become a delusion or a voice. Summary: in the whole healing process, emotions do not have to be your enemy. They can become your early warning, your teacher, your signal of fatigue, tension, or stress. If you see them before they become a story, you will be able to stop many episodes before they truly begin. Here, Buddhism and modern psychotherapy speak with one voice: an emotion is a wave. It is up to you whether you simply notice it or allow it to carry you away into its story. In the following chapters, we will look in more detail at what to do when thoughts, voices, and interpretations have already appeared, how to talk to them, how to question them, how to gradually weaken their influence. Before we get to that, however, it is worth mastering this stage well, seeing the body as the first messenger. If you learn to pause at the level of tension, fear, and fatigue, many of the ego's stories will never have time to unfold. And that is a real, practical form of freedom.